What? Right there? Gosh, I hope that's on camera. The Long Rocks in Hopedale, Louisiana are a great destination for inshore anglers wanting to try their hand at catching a limit of speckled trout. But where is this fishing hotspot located? How can you get there safely, and what's the best way to fish it? If learning more about inshore fishing in Louisiana is your thing, then please consider subscribing to this channel, and in order to really address those questions, it's best that we get started with understanding why speckled trout are at the Long Rocks in the first place. See, speckled trout begin spawning in April, and when they do, they require saltier water that is at least 15 to 17 parts per thousand. And that saltier water is found on the outside of the marsh in places like Breton Sound, or if you're west of the Mississippi River, the beaches of Elmer's Island. As speckled trout make their way toward the outer coast of Louisiana, they tend to pile up at locations like the Long Rocks. This explains why the Long Rocks aren't particularly abuzz with speckled trout in December. Their needs have them eating somewhere else. So you can see that it is the alignment of the necessary conditions and circumstances that cause them to be at this hotspot. But there's more to it. The Long Rocks also have a lot of cover that baitfish prefer to live in. You guessed it, it's the man-made rock jetty that attracts the bait. And it's not just the rocks you see above the water. Plenty of them have spilled out to line the bottom as well. Furthermore, what makes the Long Rocks such a great fishing spot is protection from wind, especially from the south and west, which is common during summer. But there's a problem with the Long Rocks, and that problem is that they're easily recognized. This fishing spot is nothing new, and that it turns on during summer isn't really a secret either. If this weren't the case, everyone and their mom wouldn't show up every year. So, spoiler alert, this spot is a community honey hole. When the word inevitably gets out, like it does every year, it will only be a matter of time before the place is pressured by the flotilla and the trout go somewhere else. But if you keep watching, you will learn the tips and tricks to making the most of this fishing spot, even when it gets crowded. And one way I do that is by changing how I fish the Long Rocks, bringing in limits of speckled trout and leaving them biting. It's a little different than what most inshore anglers utilize and could even take a little bit of practice to get right. The best way to really explain my method is by looking at the traditional one used by most inshore anglers first. See, typically, boats anchor along the length of the rocks, about a casting distance away, and try their luck by chunking live shrimp underneath a cork. While this does work, it is not, in my humble opinion, the most effective way to put limits of trout in the boat. If you know my brand at all, then you know that I generally recommend foregoing the use of live shrimp, video explaining why linked below, and instead fishing with artificial lures. But the two main reasons I recommend not using live shrimp are: number one, the primary forage at the Long Rocks are not shrimp, and number two, trout are not feeding away from the rocks where shrimp typically migrate. Now, somebody hearing that just had a brain aneurysm, so don't get me wrong. There is no doubt in my mind that any trout would love to eat a shrimp, but tons of shrimp aren't regularly flowing through there on their migration to the Gulf. So, if the number one forage aren't shrimp, then what is? Well, speckled trout are feeding on fin fish like violet gobies and croakers that live on or near the rocks, not unlike what happens during the winter pattern. Look here and see a croaker that a trout at the Long Rocks spit up after being caught. That is why speckled trout are on the Long Rocks in the first place, and why they're not feeding in a tide line in the middle of the MRGO like they otherwise would when shrimp are running. A good example of that pattern would be like Martello Castle during the fall pattern. But this isn't fall. This is summer. The white shrimp, they're not running yet. So I feel that anchoring your boat and throwing a popping cork towards the rocks is effective, but not as effective as trolling and throwing a jig on casting tackle. When you fish with a jig, you are putting a lure that looks like the bait speckled trout are eating where they are looking to eat it. That is a big difference. Specifically, it's been my experience that throwing something that's lighter, like an 1/8 ounce jig head, is a good choice. As for color, I recommend matrix shad and ultraviolet, or whatever color makes you feel warm and fuzzy. Now, let's look at this technique in action. So let's go ahead and we're gonna get started with the jiggy jig. Here we go. That's a rock. No, it's not. My rod tip's shaking. What is that? Is he hung up the trout? bit it, and then got hung up on a rock? What is this? It's a giant ass flounder. Oh my God, it's a giant ass flounder. In this video, you can see how I'm throwing right up against the rocks, even hitting the rocks, then working the jig through them back to the boat. You can reel it slowly or use the Pontchartrain pop. Just listen to what the fish are trying to tell you. This is the technique that I used to catch limits of speckled trout for years. And I think that keeping the boat moving like you're on a Pac-Man pattern is key. And if you don't know what that is, then please check out this video here. You'll find a link in the video description below. Where are the long rocks and what's the best way to get to them? You'll find the long rocks located on the Mississippi River Gulf outlet just outside of Hopedale, Louisiana. Hopedale Marina is the closest launch to the long rocks, with the spoil canal being the fastest route. But I do recommend launching at Campos Marina because you will more likely than not get in the water faster there. And if you go around the rock dam, it will be much easier, not to mention much safer, navigating down the Mississippi River Gulf outlet than down the spoil canal. Please check the video description below for videos showing how to navigate the spoil canal and how to get around the rock dam. Where should you go once the long rocks become too crowded? As mentioned earlier, this fishing hotspot is a well-documented community honey hole that everybody knows about. You're really better off finding fish in spots that are less obvious. Well, that's what I specialize in, and over the years I discovered a process to doing that exact thing. I've successfully applied that process across Louisiana's coast, east of the Mississippi River, west of the Mississippi River, and even inside of the Mississippi River. Eventually, I realized that this process could help people catch fish, so I produced it in a series of 50+ videos totaling about 12 hours of watching. So imagine if you and I could sit down to learn everything it is that I know. That's exactly what you'll find inside Inshore Fishing 101. But I did a thing. I published that course as a book called Boot State Specs. Some people just prefer a book over a video course, so that's why I made that move. And, the hell did I, oh, sorry, here. Aha! Boot State Specs. It's a big book. Anyway, you'll find links to both in the video description below. So what do you think? How do you fish the long rocks? Have you been there lately? Do you have a fishing report? If so, post them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to know when the next one goes live, then please consider subscribing and ringing that bell for all notifications. Tight lines, and thank you for watching.